point, basically, our idea and knowledge of Sinai is not only avois avoiseinu up the line, but it's also actually presentable and knowable based on pure logic and evidence. Now, I did it very bekitzer here because I have other things to say on a big way. But that's why we never say a pasuk, Ato horeso laha amin ki Hashem hu Elokim. The pasuk says, Ato horeso loda'as ki Hashem hu Elokim. Because Ma'amad Har Sinai is not a matter of emunah, it's a matter of yediyah. Ato horeso, says the pasuk, you have been shown. Har Sinai, lodas, to know ki Hashem hu Elokim. I know there's a wall here with a thermostat. It's not, I don't believe it. Oh, I believe there's a thermostat here. I don't believe. I know it. Har Sinai is Yediyah. So what's emunah then? What's emunah? Emunah actually is a word that should be translated differently than we translate it. A lot of words end up taking on certain connotations over the years. The word mitzvah, what does it mean? Oh, it's a mitzvah to cross the street and walk and give. It's a mitzvah to give your clothing into that cleaning store. He's a poor man, it's a mitzvah. Is that one of the Taryag mitzvahs? It's a mitzvah to go cross the old grandfather the street. The word mitzvah is used like a good deed, a nice thing to do. But the actual word mitzvah is one of Taryag mitzvahs, a tzivui from Hashem. So a word is used in a new way sometimes. The word emunah also, we use it as emunah b'tochen, we believe. Emunah actually is not belief. The word emunah, if you think it's belief, you have problem every day you daven. Rabbo emunasecha. We say to Hashem, Rabbo, great is emunasecha. Your emunah? That's good. Hashem believes a lot. So what does it mean, emunasecha? Emunasecha, the word omein. It comes from the word dependability. Vayhi oimein es Hadassah. Mordechai raised Hadassah, she depended upon him. Kasher yiso ha'oimein es hayoinek. As a nursing mother carries a baby, the nursing mother is called an oimein because the baby depends on the mother. In davening we say Umalchusoi ve'emunasoi lo'ad kayomis. About Hashem we say His kingdom and His emunah is eternal. What does it mean, His emunah? Hashem's belief? He believes in us? No. His dependability, His falestlichkeit is eternal. And that's what the Rambam means in Ani Mamin also. Ani Mamin be'emunah shleima. I believe with complete belief. Is there such a thing as half belief? There's no such thing. Belief is either yeah or not. 23 hours a day you're going to say Tehillim, and 1 hour you're going to bow down to the Getchka, so you're mostly believing? It's garnished. So what does the Rambam mean, Ani Mamin Emunah Shleima? If you translate it instead of belief, if you translate it dependency, depend upon, now it makes sense. I have a yediyah, a knowledge, ato haresa, that Sinai is real. And that Shavuos is not just some kind of historical commemoration, but it's an annual event of a Matan Torah, and it's real. And now, if I have that yediyah, what's my emunah? The Rambam says, you know what your emunah should be, your dependency should be, your trust in that should be in action, emunah shleima, full dependency and full trust. Let's put that in practical terms. I'll use a man's example, but the women will understand it too. It's the winter time. You have an interview for a job. You haven't had a job in 6 months, Khalila. You need desperately a job. Your interview is 5 p.m. It's 3 minutes to 5. You're in the office in Manhattan waiting for your interview to start. It's your big chance. And you now remember, I didn't daven mincha. And it's almost Seis HaKoichovim. We're not talking to Shkia even. It's almost Seis HaKoichovim. What do I do? Well, I gotta have the interview. It's pikuach nefesh. I'll daven 2 mayrivs or something. Or let me quick say havinenu or something like that. Or do I say, hey, listen, ani mamin, I depend on the Rabbeinu Shalom. I'm going to daven mencha. My panos is from Hashem. That's the Rambam's talking about. Ani mamin b'emunah shleima. Mamin is actually the implementation of the yediyah. We have the yediyah ato harei solodas ki Hashem hu Elokim. We have the yediyah. We know it. We're going to celebrate it with cheesecake. Now the question is, Ani Mamin, do I actually put it into practice? Do I actually run my life with that yediyah translating into my action? Ani Mamin, I trust and I depend on Hashem be'emunah shleima, with full dependency and with full trust. Because we may have the yediyah, the information that Sinai is real, but the question is, do we translate it into our lives? Now, I like to be very practical. So how do you translate this into your life? What should we do? We're here in Kingsway Shul today. Everybody's gathered. They want to go home with something. I'll try my best, Be'ezras Hashem, to make a few points and of things that I think we can do to be able to strengthen our emunah, our dependency in Hashem, and have a hisayrus and information and yediyas that we can take and put in practical terms to strengthen this emunah, this trust and dependency and connection with Hashem. And I basically boiled it down to that a person has to not let events, personalities, and information slip by without using it. That means everybody experiences things during their life. Good things, things that are ma'orer them, things that inspire them, some vort that somebody said, some maisa that they heard, some person that they meet. If we actually will take these things, incidents that occur, things that we hear, and put it in our storage bank and keep it for us, it can be useful for us as spiritual nourishment, and it can be useful for us in chinuch of our children, our families, and kiruv rechaykim also. I'll give you an example. When I learn different svarim, what I try to do with the svarim is, I try actually to, when I find something interesting in the Sefer, to actually write it down. So I have a frame of reference of that spot. That can be done with any Sefer, with Gemara, with Zohar, with Navi, with anything. Happens to be that, I'll give you examples. This here Sefer, notebook, is things I wrote down from Zohar. That I learned through the Zohar, the best of my ability. I wrote things that should give me a chizuk and an action event to be able to put Yediyah into action. I have a whole notebook full of it, and I decided to just read one that's ma'orim me. The Zohar says, if you say Shema Yisrael, you're supposed to have in mind all the kavanas of Shema Yisrael. Shema is a Rosh Tevis of Oil Malchus Shemayim. Shema is Rosh Tevis Su'u Morei Meinechem. Shema is Rosh Tevis Shachris Mincha Arvis. Shema is Rosh Tevis Amekadesh Shvi. Very nice things. The real kavanas go in the end. Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem is our power. Hashem Echad, Yochid, Umiyuchad. One, singular, unique. Echad is Gematria 13, Meramas on Yud Gimel Midah Shel Rachamim, and everyone knows that the ayin of Shema and the dalet of Echad are large in the Torah, because it spells the word aid. Aid means a witness. You say Shema in the morning, and at night you are the witness 2 times a day to Achdus Hashem, that Hashem is real. Says the Zohar, what about the rest of the letters? The word Shema, we're taking the ayin. The word Echad, we're taking the Dalet. We're making aid out of that. But we left off letters, 2 letters in Shema, the Shin and the Mem, and 2 letters in Echad, the Aleph and the Ches. Says the Zohar B'Shem Rab Hamnuna Saba, there's a kavanah for that too. The letters Shin, Mem of Shema, and the letters Aleph, Ches of Echad, if you switch the letters around and reformulate them, it spells the word Esmach. Aleph from Echad, the Sin or Shin and the Mem from Shema, and the Ches from Echad, spells the word Esmach. Says Rav Hamnuna Saba, anyone who thinks this kavanah b'shas Kriyas Shema, Siman Yofeloi, and it's a skula that he should be besimcha the whole day. Now, I'm just bringing one example of something. The Zohar is in Pashas Pinchas, and if you're using the Sulam, it's Ice Tough Ayin. I'm just bringing one example of the kind of idea of finding something in a sefer and writing it down or putting it away or putting it in your mind, so that when the opportune time comes and you feel down one day, you pull that out to be ma'or yourself. You're sitting on a shvuas with your children and you're talking about Shema Yisrael or Karbalam Shamayim, or you're up to Pashas Devarim V'eschanan where it says Shema Yisrael. What a wonderful Dvar Torah to say at the house. It's one type of way of being able to reach a higher emunah connection with Hashem. The last 2 days, I saw two moiridik, beautiful little shtiklach in this sefer by Rabbi Shimon Schwab on Yeshaya. I'm not marketing for Art Scroll right now. I never really learned Yeshaya properly, everybody knows in the yeshivas. So I decided when this sefer came out, I'm going to find out what is really going on. And I learned Yeshaya, and I came to the Haftarah in Yeshaya that we say one of the Haftarahs of the 7 weeks of Nechama after Tisha B'Av. The Jews say Hashem has left us. Hashem says no. Hasishkach isha ula merachim be'mitna. Would a woman forget her little child? I wouldn't forget you. Chas v'sholem. Gam eila sishkachna. Even those, a woman may forget her little child faster than I'm going to forget you. V'anoichi lo yeshkocheich. What a wonderful pasuk. Rav Schwab brings down a medrash that Hashem is really telling us, Gam eila sishochachna. Eila is a remiss to the Egel Hazov. When the Jews said Nebuch, Eila Elohecha Yisrael. Hashem says, Gam Eile, what you said, Eile Elohecha Yisrael, Tishochachna. I'm forgetting about. Cleaned out of that. But Ve'onoichi Lo Eshkochecha. What you said, Ve'onoichi, when you listened and you accepted Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, that I'll never forget. What a myridica little piece on this pasuk. I happen to have seen this last week. I remember the latest things most, Hashem is saying to us a remiss through the Medrash and the Navi, the Eila, you said Eila L'Achi Yisrael, the Egel Azov, forget about it, I'm looking away from that, I'm pushing that away, says Hashem. And what you said on Anoichi, when you answered to Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, you were with me on that stays. One more. This was last night I saw this. Last night, a few prokim later, the pasuk from the Haftarah on a Tainis Sibur, he says Hashem's machshava is way higher than ours. We know Hashem can make yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. Hashem also has the power to make ayin from yesh, to make something into nothing the other way. And that's why we say Hashem's machshavos are not like our machshavos, because Hashem's machshava, whatever his ability of thinking is, which is beyond us, can actually make something into nothing. What's the something? Hashem can make that if you do tshuva, the sin no longer exists. I'm quoting. Tshuva is one of the greatest miracles imaginable. It changes existence to non-existence. It converts yesh to ayin. It doesn't exist. If you do tshuva, it's not we push the sin under the rug. We're ignoring it. It ceases to exist. Just like the world came from yesh me'ayin, this becomes ayin, nothing from yesh. And he translates based on that the Gemara that says, whoever says King David sinned is mistaken. You know why? Because he did tshuva. And when he did tshuva, the sin ceases to exist as if it is non-existent. A person sometimes thinks they do tshuva, okay, we did tshuva, we clapped al-Chayda with Yom Kippur, we did this, we did that. But still, did I really accomplish something? Look at that medrash on the pasuk. You come out of Yom Kippur, mamish, the sins are not forgiven. They're non-existent in creation. I mention these things as the kind of thing that people should be aware of when they're learning, when they're looking in Sforim, where they're reading something, to find a piece and don't let it escape. Write it down or write it into your memory. There's another thing. You hear sometimes somebody says something. It shouldn't go over our heads. It should make an impression. If it's something really solid, it should make an impression. I'll get personal. When I was 15 years old, and I was in my second year in Mesivta, I was learning in Chavetz Chaim Yeshiva in Queens. My father, Oliver Sholem, was a Rav in Queens, and I went to high school there. And I learned by a Rebbe whose name was Rabbi David Wiener, Shlita. In fact, he is Rabbi Pinchas Scheinberg's son-in-law. He was a young man then, obviously, and I was a bacharo. And we came to the first day in class, and Rabbi Wiener learned with us a piece of Gemara. You could verify this. Call him up. He lives in Queens. He's still active in the yeshiva, Baruch Hashem. He's not a Mesivta Malamed anymore. He's a mashgiach in the Beis Medrash today. But we're talking about a couple of years ago when I was 15. 2 years, 3 years, a little more, whatever. And he said the first day we learned the Gemara, he said, if you don't know this Tosfos, then for your whole life you're missing a piece of Torah. That's motivational. At least how important it is. Then the next day we learned Mishnah Brura, and Rabbi Wiener said, if you miss out this halacha, it's not like the Tosfos. The Tosfos, you missed one piece. Okay, you missed one piece. But in the halacha, if you miss it your whole life, you may be doing something wrong. What an impression it made on the boys in the class, the importance of halacha. The next day we learned Mesilas Yesharim Musar, and we learned a paragraph there with some kind of Musar concept. And here Rabbi Wiener said to the boys, if you miss the one halacha, you may be doing something wrong your whole life. But if you miss this piece of Mesilas Yesharim, your whole life may be wrong. Not doing something wrong, your whole hashkafa may be wrong. Now this is years, decades and decades later, it sticks in my mind on an everyday basis. Do you think he remembers what he said? Maybe. Do you think he knew at that time what an impression it made on me that I'm saying it over decades and decades later here? But these kind of things are things that we should be looking for and grabbing at and trying to keep and internalize. Everybody knows that masses, an acute masa, an interesting masa, is something which it motivates people. You hear a maisa, write it down, let it be brought in to your life. I'd say 30 masas now for us. I want to say one. An example of something that's ma'orer me, but pre-Shavuos. There's a story, a true story, of a soldier in the Tsar's army, a Jew, who showed up the first day of Sukkot in his uniform in the Beis Medrash of the first Slonim Rebbe, the Beis Avraham, the Seder Shayrish Avodah, first Slonim Rebbe, Seder Avodah. And the Slonim Rebbe looked at him, and the Slonim Rebbe said, "Wow, your face is shining. What did you do? What happened?" And the soldier, Jewish soldier, says, "I don't know. The Rebbe says, tell me what happened in the last 24 hours. So the soldier says to the Rebbe, I'll tell you, last night, the first night of Sukkot, I was on guard duty at the perimeter of this town, outside the wall of the town of Slonim here. And it was nighttime, and it was the first night of Sukkot, and I'm standing on guard duty, and I can't move, and I can't go anywhere. And on the other side of the wall are some Jewish houses, and I hear Yidden sitting in their sukkahs, making kiddush, singing zmiris, and I'm stuck here, and it's the first night sukkahs, and I want to have kiddush, and I want to have amoitzi and say a leishe b'sukkah, but I'm on guard duty. What should I do? I'm stuck." And I'm standing there hours and hours, and it's almost midnight when it's I can't. It's too late to do the mitzvah d'oraisa, and it's almost midnight, and I notice about 10 to 12. There's nobody around, no other soldiers, no pedestrians, nobody. I quickly climbed over the wall into the town, went to the nearest sukkah, was right by there. The people had long left and gone out back to the house, gone to sleep. I took out the 2 bilkalach that were in my pocket. I quickly made kiddush on the bilkalach. He had no wine. He had to make kiddush on the bilkalach, on the little rolls. And I made a leishe basukah, and I ate it, and I benched, and I climbed back over the wall. The Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe says, nah, that's not it. That's not what's making your face shine. That's not it. What else happened? Nothing. Well, when I came back to my spot, I was so happy that I was able to do the mitzvah, that nobody was around. I danced in my own circle for hours, so happy. That did it, said the Rebbe. That did it. That's what makes your face shine and glow for the Yontif. That's where we're at. That's where our connection to Sinai is. It's fine that we stood at Mamad HaSinai, but that's the Koilos of Rokim. Koilos of Rokim is via a good vort or a medrash or a zoyar that picks us up. Koilos of Rokim is remembering something we heard in a speech maybe decades later. Koilos of Rokim is a maaseh that touches us, that we carry with us, that we transmit to someone else. I have to add though, and I'm always a little wary of talking about personal things, but I think that the subject warrants that I actually talk about something personal. What is ma'ir me? Now, obviously, I'm not the person who has the biggest hisayrus in the world, and without being truthful, there are people who are more nisayr than me, and avodas Hashem. But whatever I have, where's it from? So I'll tell you a little bit personal history, and I think it's applicable for everybody. I didn't grow up in Borough Park or in Williamsburg. Actually, the most fateful day in my life was a day in 1953 that my father saw something in the Morgan Journal. My father was a Rav in the Bronx, and the shul was a shvacha shul, and he was a malamed in a few yeshivas, and he wasn't making ends meet. And there was an ad in the Morgan Journal that a shul in Queens is looking for a rabbi. And my father applied for the position. This is 1953, and they accepted him. And we got in our car, and we packed up, and we went over the Triborough Bridge, and we could have gone over, not the Triborough Bridge, but we could have gone over the Atlantic Ocean, because the Bronx in 1953 in our old neighborhood was a Yiddish neighborhood, and where we showed up in Queens, there were used car lots, stray dogs, and Irish bars. And the neighborhood was a shvacha neighborhood. And this was my new existence in this neighborhood. My parents, Aleim HaSholem, being very fine Elech Yidden, the house was a Yiddish house, and Shabbos was Shabbos, and Yontif was Yontif, but there was no support system in the street. I used to go with my father as a little boy to shul, and we'd come to the shul on Friday nights, in the winter certainly, and we'd sit there waiting and waiting for the minyan. The shul was a big shul with 300 seats. In the back was those Shabbos clocks, those old torque clocks that used to tick very loud. The only thing you'd hear is the ticking of the clocks. And I'd be sitting there, my father would be, Olav HaShalom would be sitting there, and Noch HaYidl Let's Fade Dry, and we'd be waiting, where's the minyan? And the benches are empty. And sometimes we got a minyan, and sometimes we didn't get a minyan. And we'd walk home, and on the way home we used to pass the LIRR with the subway. I used to think to myself, the malachim that are malava somebody home, they must be scared to go with me and my father, because we're going through these neighborhoods where the stores are open and the train is going and the buses are going and we're passing literally 7 or 8 bars on the way home. By the way, when we got home, if we had a minyan, my mother would ask my father, you had a minyan? My father would say, sure. And when there wasn't a minyan, and she'd ask him, you had a minyan? He sort of didn't answer. He was always positive about it. But this was the environment. One time, a Yid in my father's shul, I'm sitting there the first night Sukkot, and he takes a $5 bill out of his pocket, and he puts it on the bench, and he says to me, Eliyahu, take it. I was about 7, 8 years old. Your father's not looking. Of course, I laughed at him. I wasn't taking the money. What did I even need money for? But I told my father afterwards. He was quite angry. But there's neither here nor there. This was the environment I grew up in. This was, I went to yeshiva. I traveled to Forest Hills to go to yeshiva, where there was some Yiddishkeit. But when it came Shabbos, Shabbos was nothing. And the kids I had to play with in the street used to throw my yarmulke down the sewer. What's this hakdama for? The hakdama is for that when I got to high school and I went into Chafetz Chaim High School, and I spent there one time, the first year I spent in the yeshiva in Chafetz Chaim High School, Rosh Hashanah and Simchas Torah, and I saw as a 14-year-old boy the Besmedrish boys dancing with a simcha on Simchas Torah. The picture is still in my mind. It's a picture of hispalus. It's a picture of astonishment. It's an event I will not forget. I think the Koilos Uvrakim is exactly that. I had an experience of Koilos Uvrakim when I came in as a 14-year-old boy to that yeshiva. I think that kind of thing is what we need, and we have to be aware of, and we have to try and find those experiences. Even if you grew up in a frum neighborhood, there's places to go and things to do, like the Siyam Hashas, Uchedoime, to be able to give us an experience of Koilos Uvrakim. 2 years later, 3 years later, I was 17 years old. It was a week after the 6-day war. I didn't know what I was going to do for the summer. I got a call from somebody that they need counselors in Camp Deal in New Jersey. The camp had gone through a whole crisis, and they needed counselors. They didn't know where to schlep counselors from. In the end, I took the job as a counselor there, and they had schlepped counselors from all over the place. They had a few YU boys, some Lubavitchers, some Satmar guys from Williamsburg. They had a crew of counselors that didn't match one the other, zero, just crazy land. But it was great for me, because I met for the first time Chassidish boys from Crown Heights and Williamsburg. And they invited me to come to Crown Heights and Williamsburg for Shabbosim after the summer, which I did. And I'll just share one experience. I went to Williamsburg. This is my first time in Williamsburg, other than in the weekdays when my father used to go there to buy bakery things in Cholav Yisrael and go ride back to Queens. First Shabbos in Williamsburg. We davened early in some shul, and we went from shul to shul on a tour of Williamsburg. My friend took me. I remember walking into Salem. I could tell you it happened in Satmar or in Klosenberg or Popa. It didn't. It happened in a small shul in Salem on corner Rodney and Bedford. I walked into the shul. They were holding by Kigavna right before Ma'ariv. And the Olam was saying Kigavna with such a hisoirus, and I was 17 years old and I'm eating it up. Every week when I say Kigavna, without fail, I picture June 67 in Williamsburg in that shul. Everyone in this room has to find their picture of his Eirus, their Koilos Uvrakim. Search your memory. If you can't find it, you got to look for it and find it now and put it away. And as best as you can, transmit that to your children, or better, find a way to take your children to something, to an event, to a person, something to give them that his Eirus, outside of school and outside of education. One more. I changed yeshivas to Torah V'das. Baruch Hashem, wonderful yeshiva. I stayed in the dorm on Shabbos because I didn't want to go back to Queens. There was nothing there. I used to go to Borough Park and go into the different places, to the Bluzheva and the Stachina and the Kipishnitsa and Bobiv. I remember the first time I came into Bobiv. The Bobiv Eruv Zechrana Levrucha Reb Shloimeh. I walk in, I never was in Bobiv. I never saw the Bobiv Eruv, nothing. I was 17. I walk into Bobiv, and the Bobiv Eruv was in the middle of saying Shalom Aleichem by the Tish. I never saw a Yid say Shalom Aleichem like that. And I saw some pretty good Yidden, including my own father and my Zayda. But I never saw a Yid say Shalom Aleichem like that. And I stayed for the whole Tish, and I stayed for dancing and everything. And in fact, in those days, it was such a small island, there were only 30, 40 people, that as soon as the Baba Veruv spotted Episanaya Bucher, I got a glass of beer instantly. My father claims that the Baba Veruv bought me off with one glass of beer. Kol Yomov, he used to say, with one glass of beer. But you can buy somebody with a glass of beer. The point is, it's a Yid who is into Shabbos in a way that I never actually saw, in a Mayridik way. These experiences are really important. Now, there's a conglomerate of things that we've discussed, and it's not one exact program, but it's the idea of always having a hisayrus. And I want to tell you something. In my opinion, what I'm saying is based on everything I said is based, in my opinion, on a pasuk that talks about our era and on a Gemara that defines it as our era. The pasuk is the famous pasuk. Every pasuk is made famous by somebody making a song out of the pasuk. The pasuk is the famous pasuk in Amos. Hine yomim boyim ne'um Hashem. Days are going to come, says Hashem. V'hishlachti ro'ov ba'aretz, and I will send a hunger in the land. Loi ro'ov lalechem, v'loi tzom alamoyim, ki im l'shmoyes dvar Hashem. Not for food and water, but a hunger to hear Hashem's words. That's our time. A hunger to hear Hashem's words. V'no'u miyam liyam, and people will travel from ocean to ocean. Umitzofain, let me translate it. And from North America, v'ad Mizrach, to the Middle East, for yeshivas and seminaries. Yishaitetu levakesh es dvar Hashem. They'll wander the world looking for the word of Hashem. V'lo yimtzou, and they won't find it. What's going on? We're not going to find it. We'll find plenty of yeshivas and seminaries, plenty of nice Jewish houses, Baruch Hashem, Kein Yirbu. But that element of Dvar Hashem, that hispalus, that wonder, that simcha, that dveikus in the Rabbeinu Shalom, that's what we have to find. That's what's missing, says the Navi. And based on this pasuk, the Gemara in Shabbos says that Asida Torah shetikach mi Yisrael, that in the future the Torah will be forgotten. How could that be? Well, let's say not. It doesn't mean the Torah exactly. It means the Hisayrus will be forgotten. There'll be plenty of Yiddishkeit, and everything will be Chadash, and everything will be Glat Kosher and Cholav Yisrael. But are we into a Hisayrus? Are we Chadash, a new person every Shavuos? It's going to be forgotten. But you know, the Baal Yartzeit of Thursday, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, argues on that Gemara, and he says, Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Chas v'sholom, Shabbos daf kuf lametes. Chas v'sholom shetikach Torah mi Yisrael. It won't be forgotten. It says ki lo yishochach. So they asked Rabbi Shimon, what about the pasuk here that says Hine yomim boyim ne'um Hashem, and everybody's going to look for something and they won't find it? What about that pasuk? So he says that pasuk means that people will look for halacha brura or mishnah brura b'makom echad. They will look for clarity in only one place. You won't be able to find clarity in one place. You will need multiple places to find clarity. Using it the way I want to translate it is, a person has to have multiple assaults on the Yetzer Hara, multiple sources of Hisayrus. The Hisayrus source may be a speech, maybe a Dvar Torah, maybe a book in Eichlas, maybe an incident that happened where you felt Hashkachas Hashem. The incident, the Torah, the Maaseh, the event shouldn't go over our heads. We should find it, internalize it, hold on to it, each person their own, each person in their own circumstances. I'm over my time, so I'm just going to wish everybody that this Shavuos we should hear the Kailas of Rakim. Internally, they should be there for us. We're doing great in Yiddishkeit, Baruch Hashem. Everything is there. All we got to do is the little match to light the fire. All the raw material is there. Yiratzin, we should be Zoichet, a Kabbalah, Tzatayra, with Kailas of Rakim, Besimcha, V'sasain, in health and in wealth and in Hatzlacha, Baruch Niyas, V'yashmias. Thanks for coming. Guten Tag.